You can add a thick stroke to the width of your letter M to get it proportionate to the other capital letters if you like. And then we're going to start out by bracketing the M with two thin vertical strokes. That'll get you your width established. And then go ahead and fill in the thick stroke on the right. From there, we're going to find our center point at the bottom and strike a thin line down to that center point from the location that you see at that top of that thin stroke, just slightly below the top line. And from there, we're going to go ahead and strike another line that'll match that from the top inside corner of that right thick stroke. Then we're going to go ahead and fill in the thick stroke on the left. All of these systems combined will help you to make a uniform, consistent capital M almost every time. Starting with a flat vertical brush, we go ahead and strike our first thin line going down the italic axis. And then we go ahead and do the same thing for our right side. Go ahead and make a flat, thin, vertical line. This will establish and bracket the width of our M. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to fill in that thick stroke on the right, which is going to establish where our center is at the bottom of the M, where the point is. So that distance between the inside of that thick stroke and the thin stroke on the left is our center point. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little dot right there to indicate the center. Boom, that's where I'm headed. That's my A to B. Very mechanical. You don't have to think. You have to wonder. So I'm just going below the top line. There's a reason for that. And I'm just going to meet right at that B point, right at the middle point. And I'm going to go ahead and paint the other one from that inside corner. I'm going to meet it right up and to make that point. Clean it up a little. And next, with a flat brush, I am going to fill in that thick stroke on the left, keeping it consistent with the other thick stroke, and then just follow it up. And you are done. You've got it locked in, you've got nice angles, you've got nice spacing. Now all you have to do is serif out of there. So these top ones are half serifs, so they stop. You don't go beyond, like so. And I just do all the serifs at this point. You do want to make them the same length. Then flatten out your brush to round them off. And you'll see how on the upper left corner, I'm going to tie in the round right down into that thick stroke. So it's just going to start out tucked in and then I just flow right down into it. That's why you start out low with that thin stroke on that angle. Then just round everything off. I came down with a vertical brush. I spun it clockwise. Now here I'm spinning it counterclockwise. Coming up here. Here I don't have to spin it because it's going in the favorable direction. So it's just a flat brush. This one too. And this one too. The lowercase m starts with that little curved 45-degree stroke. Then from there we go with a vertical flat brush tucked in just below the top peak. And then we're going to pull down and spin the brush counterclockwise to come down with a straight vertical stroke. And then we're going to take a flat brush and we're going to tuck it in that upper corner. And we're going to follow that out slightly, flare it out slightly to make the thick stroke, spinning just a hair clockwise, and then finish off the bottom, squaring it off. Then just like the H, we're going to make the similar next thin stroke. I'm going to start out coming at an arc and meeting down at the lower inside corner of that thick stroke to give you a nice space in that intersection. And then we're going to come back and we're going to do the same stroke we did for the first stroke. Vertical brush, tucked just below the top point, spinning counterclockwise, almost straight but following the axis. Flatten out the brush again, tuck it into that corner. As you jam it in there, pull it out, push down to make the thick stroke, bring it straight on down following the axis, and then square it off at the bottom. Then another thin stroke, just like the first one, starting at the top, a nice smooth arc, meeting right down. Yeah, we want to match those two spaces, so those two distances we want them to be the same so they're consistent. Bring it right down to that point, just like the first one. Now the next stroke is going to be just like the lowercase I. So we start out with a flat brush, tucked just below the top point, making that curve to the right taper. Then we're going to come back with a flat brush, tuck it into that corner, and finish it off with a thick stroke just like the I, just like the lowercase I. And then taper it off. I spun it clockwise that time. And then finish it off with a terminal. We're going to do the same thing with the capital N as we did with the capital M, but it'll be much easier. We're going to start out bracketing the width of the letter, which will be a standard width at this point, with two thin lines following our italic axis. And then we're going to go ahead and make our diagonal line, and I attempted to do it with a thick stroke, but I would go ahead and just do it with a thin stroke. It's much more accurate to line it up just below the top line and then just strike the line right to that right side lower point, to make a point, nice sharp point. I was attempting to try to make a thicker line and then pull my brush counterclockwise to taper it into that point. But it's much easier just to go ahead and just make a thin line and then just fill that in. And it's much more accurate. You'll get a much more accurate thick stroke that way. And once you've done these 4 strokes, you're done. You can serif it and you've got a capital letter N. Horizontal flat brush. I'm going to go ahead and strike all the serifs where they go. Obviously not in that lower right point. Does not get a serif. Flatten again to round everything off. You know, and I'm not needing to turn my brush here. Here I do. And all the thin ones you got to turn. I'm turning counterclockwise there and clockwise there. Here, I'm lining it up inside and just spinning it clockwise, and then turning my brush vertical and spinning it counterclockwise. And the lowercase n is just like the lowercase m without that middle stroke. So we go ahead and we start out with our favorite little arced beginning stroke. And then we go ahead and we get our brush flat and vertical. Tuck it in just below the point and bring it down and spin counterclockwise. Then we go ahead and we tuck it in that corner, push down, flare out to the right, drag it down to create our thick stroke, square it off at the bottom. Flatten out the brush, bring our thin stroke right down to the base of that thick stroke in the side corner, leaving lots of nice space at the intersection. Then finishing the letter off with a flat brush, vertical, making that swish just below the top line, the I shape, lowercase I shape. Flatten out the brush again. And in that corner, spinning clockwise all the way through, taper off clockwise. Finish with a terminal, same length and angle as the lowercase m. Just to have that in mind, because you're going to have a lot of these letters together. When you get a lot of letters together with these terminals, you'll want to continue to make them consistent, the length and angle. That'll make the whole alphabet look really clean. For the capital O, try to make as uniform an oval as you can. You can strike a line through the middle to follow an axis. Go ahead and start with a retracted brush, just like you were going to draw it or write it with a ballpoint pen. Try to make a clean as oval as you can, coming around down to the bottom, stopping, go back to the top, looking at the oval on the left. Go ahead and make your oval on the right at the same time. So that way you can imagine it as one shape in your mind. Now, I did not make that left side to my liking, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in that left side. And this is the time to do it. Once you dial in that outside, you're locked in and you're good to go. It's worth stopping and just going ahead and filling in or tweaking that outside oval until it's just as clean as you can get it. Because once you've done that, you can adjust your thick stroke accordingly. Go ahead and flatten your brush, starting at the top, start to follow this stroke, thin stroke, push down. As you start to lift up, spin clockwise to taper off. On the right side, you're going to flatten your brush and you're going to start at the top, keeping it that thin stroke. Always try to make those thin strokes thin at the top and bottom of this. And you're going to start to push down and you're going to spin counterclockwise to follow that stroke. The lowercase o is simply a mini-me of the uppercase, except that it's within the guidelines of the lowercase. Just start out making an oval as best as you possibly can. And again, after you've made this outside line, this is the time to tweak it if you need to, before you do the thick strokes. If you're satisfied with this, go ahead and do the thick stroke and you're good to go. Flatten out your brush, start at the top, drop into the thin stroke, and then push down, spin clockwise as you taper off and up into the bottom thin stroke. So with the right side, flatten out your brush, start out following the thin stroke, push down, start to barely spin counterclockwise, but not much. Sometimes a little tune-up is needed. You want to make the two thick strokes equal to make the letter look as best as you can.